Open up, Sarah. I know you're in there. Her hand froze halfway to the wine glass she'd been reaching for. The documentary she'd been watching flickered forgotten on the screen. Her entire body went rigid, that old, familiar fear crawling up her spine like ice water. Sarah! Another round of pounding, harder this time. We need to talk. You can't just ignore me forever. She should call the police. That's what the restraining order was for. That's what her lawyer had told her to do if Marcus showed up again. But her phone was in the kitchen, and the kitchen meant passing closer to that door, and her legs felt like they'd been welded to the floor. I saw your car outside. Don't pretend you're not home. His voice was getting louder, angrier. After everything I did for you, you owe me a conversation. A calm voice spoke from the direction of her couch, making her jump. How long has he been doing this? Sarah spun around, her heart hammering. She'd completely forgotten he was there. Luca Moretti sat exactly where she'd left him 5 minutes ago, looking utterly relaxed in her modest living room like he owned the place. Which, technically, he did. He owned the whole building. He owned half the buildings in this neighborhood. His dark eyes were fixed on the door, his expression unreadable, but his posture perfectly still in that way that made him seem even more dangerous than when he moved. Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. She cleared her throat. This is the 4th time this month. I have a restraining order. But let me in. Marcus's shout was followed by what sounded like him kicking the door. You think you're too good for me now? You think you can just throw away 3 years like they meant nothing? 3 years. 3 years she'd spent walking on eggshells, making herself smaller, apologizing for things that weren't her fault. 3 years of, I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean it, and if you hadn't made me so angry, and no one else will ever love you like I do. She'd gotten out 6 months ago. Most days she still couldn't believe she'd actually done it. Luca stood up. He moved like water, smooth and unhurried, and suddenly he was right beside her. Up close, she was reminded again just how tall he was. How solid. How utterly terrifying he could be when he wanted to be. Stay here, he said quietly. Mr. Moretti, you don't have to. He was already walking toward the door. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to tell him to stop, that it wasn't his problem, that she could handle it. But the truth was, she couldn't handle it. She'd been handling it for 6 months, and Marcus kept coming back, and the police couldn't seem to do anything that actually made him stop. Luca unlocked the door and pulled it open in one smooth motion. Marcus was mid-knock, his fist still raised. He blinked, clearly not expecting the door to actually open. He was drunk. Sarah could tell from the way he swayed slightly, from the glassiness of his eyes. He was wearing the same clothes he'd probably worn to work, rumpled now, his tie loosened. Who the hell are you? Marcus demanded, his face flushing red. I'm the person who lives here, Luca said calmly. It was a lie, but Marcus didn't know that. Sarah had only learned herself an hour ago, when Luca had knocked on her door to discuss the building's new security system he was installing. She'd been nervous, inviting her landlord in for coffee, but he'd been surprisingly easy to talk to. Polite, professional, until Marcus started pounding on the door. That's crap, Marcus snarled, pushing forward. Sarah lives here, alone. I want to talk to my girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend, Sarah found herself saying, even though her voice shook. We broke up, Marcus, 6 months ago. Marcus's eyes found her over Luca's shoulder, his expression twisted into something ugly. Baby, come on, this is crazy. We can work this out. We always work things out. There's nothing to work out. Sarah forced herself to stay put, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. You need to leave. You're violating the restraining order. That stupid piece of paper? Marcus laughed, the sound bitter. You really think that means anything? After everything we've been through? After everything I've done for you? Done for her? Luca's voice hadn't gotten louder, but something in it had changed. Gone colder. Is that what you call showing up at her home repeatedly after being told to stay away? Marcus finally seemed to register that Luca wasn't moving, that he was blocking the entire doorway with his body, and that he was several inches taller and considerably more solid than Marcus's soft office worker frame. "This is between me and Sarah," Marcus said, but some of the bluster had leaked out of his voice. "No," Luca said simply. "It's not." "Who are you? Her new boyfriend?" Marcus's lip curled. "That was fast, Sarah. Real classy. How long were you seeing this guy before you left me, huh?" Sarah felt her face burn. It was so typical of Marcus, taking the truth and twisting it until somehow she was the villain in the story. "I'm not," she started. "She doesn't owe you an explanation." Luca cut her off. "She doesn't owe you anything. She's asked you to leave. I'm asking you to leave. This is your last chance to do it on your own." Marcus puffed up, trying to look bigger. "Or what? You going to call the cops?" "Go ahead. I'll be back tomorrow. And the next day. And the day after that. Sarah knows I don't give up." "Actually," Luca said, and now there was something almost pleasant in his voice, which somehow made it worse. "I wasn't planning to call the cops." He stepped forward, forcing Marcus to step back into the hallway. Sarah couldn't see what Luca did next. His body blocked her view, but she heard Marcus make a small, choked sound. "Let me explain something to you," Luca said, his voice low enough that Sarah had to strain to hear. "This building belongs to me. This entire block belongs to me, and I take care of what's mine. That includes my tenants. That includes Sarah." "You're threatening me?" Marcus's voice had gone high and thin. "I'm explaining the situation," Luca corrected. "The situation is this. You're going to walk away right now. You're going to delete Sarah's number from your phone. You're going to forget this address, and you're never going to contact her again. Not through friends, not through family, not through showing up at her work. Are we clear? You can't tell me what to do. I'll sue you. You'll what?" Luca's voice could have cut glass. "Please, finish that sentence. I'm curious what you think you can do." There was a long silence. Sarah realized she'd been holding her breath. "Do you know who I am?" Luca asked. It wasn't a boast. It was a genuine question, asked with the mild interest of someone inquiring about the weather. Sarah couldn't hear Marcus's response, but she saw the exact moment understanding hit him. His face went pale, then gray. "Oh God," Marcus whispered. "Oh God, I didn't know." "Now you do," Luca said. "So let me ask you one more time, and I suggest you think very carefully about your answer. Are we clear?" "Yes." Marcus's voice was barely audible. "Yes, we're clear. I'm sorry. I didn't mean I'll go." "I'm going." "Good choice." Luca stepped back into the apartment and closed the door. Sarah heard Marcus's footsteps, practically running down the hallway. The stairwell door banged open and shut. Then there was silence. Sarah found herself sitting down on her couch without quite remembering making the decision. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them together in her lap. Luca locked the door, both locks, and turned to look at her. "I'm sorry," she blurted out. "I'm so sorry you had to deal with that. That was so embarrassing. I swear I've been trying to make him stop, but he just keeps..." "Sarah." Luca crossed the room and sat down on the coffee table directly across from her. It put them at eye level. "Stop apologizing. But you're my landlord, and I brought drama to your building. And nothing." His dark eyes held hers. "None of this is your fault." Sarah felt something crack open in her chest. She'd heard those words before, from her therapist, from her sister, from the domestic violence counselor at the shelter where she'd finally gotten help filling out the restraining order paperwork. But somehow, hearing them from this man, this dangerous, powerful man who'd just sent Marcus running with nothing but words, made them feel real for the first time. "How did you do that?" she asked. "What did you say to him?" Luca's mouth curved slightly. "I reminded him that there are worse things than police involvement." You wouldn't actually hurt him?" "No." Luca leaned back slightly. "I don't need to. Men like Marcus are cowards. They pick vulnerable targets, and they push until someone pushes back." The moment they realize they're not the biggest predator in the room, they fold. Sarah swallowed hard. He looked terrified. He should be. But you're not, you wouldn't really... She couldn't quite figure out how to finish the question. Luca studied her for a moment. I'm going to be honest with you, Sarah, because I think you're smart enough to handle honesty. I'm not a violent man by preference, but I am a man who protects what's his. My business, my property, the people who depend on me. He paused. That includes you now. I'm just a tenant. You're a woman who's been terrorized in a building I own. That makes it my problem. His expression softened slightly. Beyond that, you're someone who clearly needs help, and I'm in a position to provide it. So I am. Sarah felt tears prickling at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry. She'd done enough crying over Marcus to last a lifetime. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me yet, Luca said. We're not done. Her stomach dropped. What do you mean? Marcus knows where you live. He knows where you work. You mentioned that earlier. And now he knows who I am, which means he knows exactly how much trouble he's in if he comes back here. Luca stood up, pulling out his phone. Which means he's going to stay away from this building, but that doesn't mean he's done. You think he'll try something else? I think men like him don't like being backed into corners. They get desperate. He tapped something on his phone screen. I'm going to have a couple of my people keep an eye on you for the next few weeks. Just to make sure. Sarah's heart hammered. That's not necessary. I can't ask you to... You didn't ask. I'm offering. He glanced up at her. Or more accurately, I'm telling you. You can argue if you want, but it won't change anything. There was something almost comforting about his certainty. Sarah had spent so long trying to handle everything herself, trying to be strong enough and smart enough and careful enough to stay safe. The idea of someone else taking that burden, even for a little while, was dizzying. I don't understand why you're doing this, she said quietly. Luca tilted his head slightly, studying her. Do you know why I came here tonight? To talk about the security system? She shook her head. I've been updating all the buildings I own. Better cameras, better locks. Panic buttons in every unit. He slipped his phone back into his pocket. Do you know why? Better protection? Better protection for the women who live in them, he corrected. I started noticing a pattern about 6 months ago. Women renting alone. Broken leases in the middle of the night. Police reports. I did some research, talked to some of my property managers. His jaw tightened. Turns out I was inadvertently renting to a lot of women trying to escape bad situations. The kind of situations where their exes show up and cause problems. Sarah's breath caught. So, I decided to do something about it, Luca continued. Better security, stricter policies about who's allowed in the buildings, and a clear message to my staff. If anyone reports harassment or threats, I want to know about it immediately. That's actually really amazing, Sarah said. It's basic human decency, Luca corrected, but apparently that's in short supply these days. He moved toward the door, then paused. I'm going to have someone posted outside tonight, just in case Marcus decides to come back. Mr. Moretti, Luca, he said. If I'm going to be protecting you, we can skip the formalities. Luca, she tried again, the name feeling strange on her tongue. This is too much. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden, Sarah. He turned back to face her fully. You're someone who had the courage to leave a bad situation. That takes strength. What happens next? Making sure you stay safe? That's on the rest of us. He left before she could respond, closing the door quietly behind him. Sarah sat there for a long moment staring at the door. Then she got up, poured herself a very large glass of wine, and tried to process what had just happened. Her ex-boyfriend, who'd been making her life miserable for 6 months, had just been scared off by her landlord. Her incredibly attractive, apparently very dangerous landlord, who'd just casually mentioned having people, and made Marcus go pale with a single question. She should be terrified, She should be packing her bags and finding a new apartment immediately. Instead, for the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt safe. The next morning, Sarah woke up to a text from an unknown number. "There's a car waiting downstairs to drive you to work. Driver's name is Marco. He'll wait and bring you home tonight. This will continue until I'm satisfied Marcus is no longer a threat." LM. Sarah stared at her phone. A car. He'd sent her a car and driver. She should refuse. This was too much. Way too much. She went downstairs. Marco turned out to be a quiet man in his 50s who opened the door for her with a polite nod and drove her to work without trying to make conversation. When she got out at her office building, he handed her a card. "My number," he said. "You need anything, you call. I'll be here at 5 to pick you up." Sarah made it through approximately 2 hours of work before her sister called. "Okay, spill," Jennifer said the moment Sarah answered. "Who's the hot guy? What are you talking about?" "The extremely hot guy currently sitting in a car outside your building having a very intense conversation with Marcus." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Marcus is there?" "Was there. Your hot friend said something and Marcus literally ran away, like actually ran. It was the most satisfying thing I've ever seen." Jennifer paused. "So who is he?" "My landlord." "Your landlord looks like that and personally runs off your ex?" "Sarah, marry him." "Jen, it's not, he's just being nice." "Nice is bringing you soup when you're sick. This is something else entirely." Jennifer's voice softened. "Seriously, though, are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" "I'm fine, really." And surprisingly, she meant it. "I'll call you later." "Okay?" She hung up and immediately dialed the number Luca had given her the night before. He answered on the second ring. "Marcus showed up at my office," she said without preamble. "I know. It's being handled." "How do you know? How is—" She stopped. "Do you have someone watching my office, too?" "I told you I was having you watched until this situation was resolved." "I thought you meant watching my apartment." "Sarah." His voice was patient. "Marcus knows where you work. Did you think I'd leave that vulnerability open?" She didn't have a good answer to that. "He won't be bothering you at work anymore," Luca continued. "I've had a conversation with his employer." Sarah's mouth fell open. "You what?" "His employer is someone I do business with. We had a conversation about Marcus's behavior and how it reflects on their company. Marcus is being offered a choice: transfer to their Seattle office immediately, or find new employment. You can't just—" "I can, and I did." There was no apology in his voice. "Marcus has been harassing you for 6 months, violating a restraining order and making you afraid in your own home. That ends now." Sarah sat down at her desk because her legs suddenly felt weak. "He's going to hate me even more." "He can hate you from Seattle," Luca paused. "Unless you're worried about him? Unless there's some part of you that still cares what he thinks?" "No," Sarah said immediately. "God, no, I'm not used to anyone actually doing something about it." "Get used to it." The line went dead. Sarah put her phone down and stared at her computer screen without seeing it. This was insane. All of this was completely insane. Luca Moretti had known her for approximately 12 hours, and he'd already done more to protect her than the police, her lawyer, and the entire legal system combined. She should be worried about owing him something, about what he might want in return. But when she examined her feelings honestly, worry wasn't what she found there. The next few days passed in a strange, surreal haze. Marco drove her to and from work. She spotted the same dark sedan parked outside her building every night, different men taking shifts. Marcus didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up. On Friday night, there was a knock on her door. Sarah checked the peephole and found Luca standing there, holding a bottle of wine and a bag from her favorite Thai place down the street. "How did you know Thai food is my favorite?" she asked as she let him in. "I pay attention." He set the food on her counter. "I thought we could celebrate." "Celebrate what?" "Marcus accepted the Seattle transfer. He's leaving Monday morning." Luca's dark eyes met hers. "He's out of your life for good." Sarah felt something enormous and overwhelming rise up in her chest. Relief, joy, and something else. Something she didn't quite want to name. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "Have dinner with me." "We're having dinner now." "No, I mean really have dinner with me. Tomorrow night. Let me take you somewhere nice." Sarah's heart started hammering. "Like a date?" "Like a date," Luca confirmed. I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because you're my landlord, and because you just solved my biggest problem, and because She stopped. "I don't want you to think I owe you anything." Luca set down the wine bottle very carefully. Then he crossed the space between them until he was standing right in front of her. "Let me be very clear," he said quietly. "You don't owe me anything. What I did, because it was the right thing to do. Because you deserved to be safe, and you weren't, and I could help." He paused. "This, asking you to dinner, has nothing to do with any of that." "Then what does it have to do with?" "The fact that you're smart and funny and stronger than you give yourself credit for." His hand came up, gentle, giving her plenty of time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her cheek. "The fact that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since I walked into this apartment. The fact that, when I look at you, I don't see someone who needs protecting. I see someone worth protecting. There's a difference." Sarah's breath caught. "I just got out of a relationship." "I know." "A really bad one." "I know that, too." "I'm probably not ready for this." "Probably not," Luca agreed. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "So we'll go slow. We'll have dinner tomorrow. We'll talk. And if you decide you're not interested, I'll respect that. I'll still make sure you're safe. I'll still be your landlord. Nothing changes unless you want it to." It was the "unless you want it to" that got her. The way he put all the power in her hands. The way he made it so clear this was her choice. No pressure, no expectations. Marcus had never given her choices. He'd given her ultimatums, demands, made her feel like she should be grateful for his attention. Luca was offering her the world and asking for nothing in return except permission. "Okay," Sarah heard herself say. "Dinner tomorrow." The smile that crossed Luca's face was devastating. "Good." They ate Thai food and drank wine, and Luca told her stories about growing up in this neighborhood, back before he owned half of it. He made her laugh. He listened when she talked. He never once made her feel like she should be someone other than who she was. When he left, he kissed her cheek, just her cheek, and told her he'd pick her up at 7. Sarah closed the door behind him and leaned against it, her heart racing. She was in so much trouble. The next night, Luca took her to a restaurant she'd walked past 100 times but never dreamed of entering. The kind of place where they knew him by name, where the owner came out to greet him personally, where they were led to a private table with a view of the city lights. "This is too much," Sarah said as she looked at the menu. Everything was in Italian. Nothing had prices. "Nothing is too much," Luca corrected. "Not for you." They talked for 3 hours. Sarah learned that Luca's family had come to this city 3 generations ago, with nothing but determination and a willingness to work hard. That he'd started buying buildings when he was barely 25, fixing them up, turning them into safe places for people who needed them. "My grandmother used to say that power without purpose is just noise," Luca said, swirling the wine in his glass. "I never wanted to just make money. I wanted to mean something." "You do," Sarah said. "Mean something, I mean." "What you did for me is what anyone should have done. But no one else did." Luca's expression darkened. "No one else saw you the way I do. And how do you see me?" He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I see someone who survived something that breaks other people. Someone who's rebuilding herself piece by piece, even though it's terrifying. Someone who's beautiful, even though she doesn't believe it yet." His hand covered hers on the table. "I see someone I want to know better, if you'll let me." Sarah felt tears prickling at her eyes again. She was not going to cry in this beautiful restaurant. "I want that too," she whispered. "Then let's start here. Luca's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. Tell me something real. Something you don't tell most people. Sarah took a breath. I'm scared, she admitted. All the time. Even now, with Marcus gone, I'm scared. Because for 3 years, he made me believe I was weak, that I needed him, that no one else would ever want me, and part of me still believes it. That part is wrong, Luca said immediately. I know. Intellectually, I know. But knowing something in your head and believing it in your heart are different things. Then let me show you. Luca's grip on her hand tightened. Let me prove to you that you're worth more than he ever made you feel, that you're strong and smart and capable, that you deserve someone who treats you like you matter. Why? Sarah asked. Why do you even care? Luca was quiet for a moment. My mother stayed, he said finally. With my father. He wasn't a good man, Sarah. He drank too much. He had a temper, and he made her miserable. She stayed for years, thinking she had to, thinking that's just what women did. By the time she finally left, she'd forgotten who she was without him. I'm sorry, Sarah said quietly. She got out eventually, rebuilt her life. But I watched what it cost her, and I swore I'd never be like him, that I'd never make someone feel small, and that if I ever had the power to help someone in that situation, I would. His eyes met hers. So that's why I care. Because no one helped my mother until it was almost too late. Because you remind me of her, strong and scared and trying so hard to be brave. And because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for. Sarah didn't realize she was crying until Luca reached across the table and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. I'm a mess, she said, trying to laugh. You're human. He stood up, then held out his hand. Come with me. Where? You'll see. He led her through the restaurant and up a set of stairs she hadn't noticed before. They emerged onto a rooftop terrace, private and beautifully lit, with the entire city spread out below them. This is gorgeous, Sarah breathed. It's mine, Luca said. The whole building. This restaurant. The apartments above it. I come up here sometimes when I need to think. Why did you bring me here? Luca turned to face her fully. Because I want you to see what I see. I want you to understand that you are not broken or damaged or any of the things Marcus made you feel. You're someone who deserves beautiful things. He stepped closer. You're someone I want in my life. Not because I feel sorry for you, not because you owe me, but because you're fascinating and brave. And when you smile, really smile, it's the best thing I've seen all week. Sarah's breath caught. Luca, I know it's too soon, he said. I know you need time. I'm willing to wait, Sarah, as long as you need. But I need you to know that this is real for me. What I feel when I look at you, that's real. What do you feel? Sarah asked, barely breathing. Like I've been looking for something I didn't know I needed until I found it. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like kissing Marcus had ever been. There was no demand in it, no expectation. Just gentle pressure, a question being asked with his lips against hers, giving her all the power to answer. Sarah answered by wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him back. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Luca rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight, he murmured. Just stay. We don't have to do anything except be together. I just want you close. Sarah should say no, should go slow, should protect herself. Okay, she said instead. Luca's apartment was 3 floors above the restaurant, and it was nothing like Sarah had imagined. She'd expected something cold and modern, all steel and glass. Instead, it was warm, comfortable, books everywhere, soft furniture, photographs on the walls. It's not what people expect, Luca said, watching her look around. It's perfect, Sarah said honestly. They stayed up until 2 a.m, talking about everything and nothing. Luca told her about the buildings he wanted to buy, the neighborhoods he wanted to revitalize. Sarah told him about her job. She was an accountant at a mid-sized firm, and her dream of maybe starting her own business someday. "You should," Luca said immediately. "I don't have the capital. I'll invest in you." Sarah laughed. "You don't even know if I'd be any good at it. You're good at everything you do, I can tell." He pulled her closer on the couch where they'd been sitting. "And even if you weren't, I'd still invest, because I believe in you." When Sarah finally fell asleep, it was with her head on Luca's shoulder and his arms wrapped around her, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, she didn't have nightmares. She woke up to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. Luca was in the kitchen, and when he saw she was awake, he brought her a cup exactly how she liked it. "How did you know?" she asked. "I pay attention," he said again, smiling. They spent the whole day together. Luca showed her more of his buildings, introduced her to some of his tenants, people who clearly respected him, even loved him. Sarah saw a different side of him, the man who remembered everyone's names, who asked about their kids, who'd quietly paid someone's medical bills when they'd fallen behind on rent. "You're a good person," she said as they walked back to her apartment that evening. "I try to be. No, I mean it. You could use your power for anything, but you use it to help people." Luca stopped walking and turned to face her. "I use it to help people I care about," he corrected. "And I care about you, Sarah. More than I probably should after knowing you less than a week." "I care about you too," Sarah admitted. "Which terrifies me." "Why?" "Because the last time I cared about someone, it almost destroyed me." "I'm not him," Luca said fiercely. "I will never be him." "I know. I do know that. But I'm still scared." "Then be scared," Luca said. "Be scared and do it anyway. That's what courage is." Sarah looked up at him. This impossible, dangerous, gentle man who'd come into her life like a hurricane and swept away all her fears, and made a decision. "I want to try," she said. "Really try. With you." The smile that broke across Luca's face was worth every moment of fear. The next few weeks were the happiest Sarah had ever been. Luca was attentive without being suffocating, protective without being controlling. He encouraged her to see her friends, supported her work, never made her feel like she owed him anything. He also, quite thoroughly, erased any memory of Marcus from her mind. The first time they made love, really made love, not just the desperate fumbling she'd known before, Sarah cried afterward. Luca held her and didn't ask why, seemed to understand that they were good tears, healing tears. "You're safe," he murmured against her hair. "You're safe and you're loved, and nothing is ever going to hurt you again. I promise." Sarah believed him. 3 months later, Luca asked her to move in with him. Sarah said yes, without hesitation. 6 months later, at the same rooftop restaurant where he'd first kissed her, Luca got down on one knee. "I know this is fast," he said, holding out a ring that must have cost more than Sarah made in a year. "And I know you might not be ready, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life than I am of you, of us. So I'm asking, Sarah, will you marry me?" Sarah looked down at this man, this incredible, impossible man who'd saved her in every way a person could be saved, and she didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, pulling him up so she could kiss him. "Yes, absolutely, yes." The wedding was small, just family and close friends, but it was perfect. Sarah wore a simple dress and flowers in her hair, and when Luca saw her walking down the aisle, he actually had tears in his eyes. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered when she reached him. "I love you," Sarah whispered back. "I love you too," Luca said, "and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it." He did. Years later, when Sarah looked back on that night, the night Marcus had pounded on her door and Luca had been sitting on her couch, she marveled at how one moment could change everything, how the worst night of her life had transformed into the beginning of the best life she could have imagined. She built that business she'd dreamed about, with Luca's support and investment. It thrived. She thrived. They had children, a boy and a girl, and Luca was the kind of father Sarah had always hoped for, but never expected to find. Gentle and patient and present. Marcus tried to come back once, about 5 years after that night. He showed up at Sarah's office, wanting to talk, saying he'd changed. Luca was there within 10 minutes. Sarah never found out what was said, but Marcus left the city permanently the next day. "What did you do?" Sarah asked that night. "I reminded him that some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed," Luca said simply. "And that you're mine to protect now and always." "Always?" Sarah asked, smiling. "Always," Luca confirmed, pulling her into his arms. "You're stuck with me." "Good," Sarah said and kissed him. She'd survived the darkness, but more than that, she'd found the light. Found someone who saw her not as something broken to be fixed, but as someone whole and worthy and worth fighting for. And every day, for the rest of her life, Luca made sure she knew it. The end came, not with a bang, but with a quiet certainty. Sarah was home. Really, truly home. Not just in the physical sense, though Luca's apartment had become their apartment, filled with her books and his photographs, and evidence of the life they were building together, but in the deeper sense of finally being somewhere she belonged. On their first anniversary, Sarah stood in that same spot where Marcus had pounded on her door all those months ago. But this time, Luca's arms were around her from behind, his chin resting on her head. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "Every day," Luca admitted. "Really?" "Every day I think about how close I came to not being here, to walking past your door 5 minutes earlier or later, to never meeting you." His arms tightened around her. "And every day I'm grateful that fate, or chance, or whatever you want to call it, put me in the right place at the right time." Sarah turned in his arms so she could look up at him. "I'm the grateful one." "You saved my life." "No," Luca said seriously. "You saved your own life when you left him. I just made sure he didn't take that choice away from you." He cupped her face in his hands. "You're the bravest person I know, Sarah. Never forget that." She wouldn't. How could she, when he reminded her every single day? They stood there together in the doorway that had once represented fear and danger, but now was just a doorway, just an entrance to the home they'd built, to the life they were living, to the future they were creating, one day at a time. And Sarah finally understood what she'd been searching for all along, through all the dark days with Marcus, through all the fear and doubt. She'd been searching for someone who saw her, really saw her, not as a prize to be won or a possession to be controlled, but as a partner, an equal. Someone worth cherishing. She'd found that person sitting on her couch on the worst night of her life, and now every single day was the best day of her life. Sarah was 6 months pregnant when she got the call. She was at her office, in the building she'd leased with Luca's help, where her accounting firm had grown from just her to a team of 8, when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Sarah Moretti?" A woman's voice, professional but strained. "Yes, this is she. This is Rebecca Chen from Metropolitan Hospital. Your husband was brought in about 20 minutes ago. There's been an incident." The world tilted sideways. Sarah gripped the edge of her desk, her other hand instinctively moving to her rounded belly. "What kind of incident? Is he okay?" "He's stable, but you should come right away. I can't give you more details over the phone." Sarah was already grabbing her purse, her keys. "I'm on my way." The drive to the hospital was the longest 15 minutes of her life. Her mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Luca had enemies. She knew that, even though he'd always been careful to keep that part of his life separate from her. He'd built his empire through hard work and smart investments, but there were people who resented his success, people who wanted what he had. And now someone had hurt him. She abandoned her car in the emergency lot and ran inside, her hand still protectively curved around her stomach. The receptionist took one look at her face and immediately called for Rebecca. The nurse who appeared was young, tired-looking, with kind eyes that held bad news. "Mrs. Moretti, your husband is in surgery right now. He was shot twice, once in the shoulder and once in the abdomen. The doctors are working on him, but he lost a lot of blood." Sarah's knees buckled. Rebecca caught her, guided her to a chair. "Shot?" Sarah's voice didn't sound like her own. "Who? Why?" "The police are here. They want to talk to you when you're ready." Sarah wasn't ready, would never be ready, but she nodded anyway. The detective who sat down across from her was a woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her badge read, Detective Morrison. "Mrs. Moretti, I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you some questions. Do you know anyone who might want to hurt your husband?" Sarah's laugh was brittle. "You're asking me if my husband has enemies?" "Detective, my husband owns half the real estate in this city. I'm sure he has plenty of people who don't like him. I'm asking about specific threats. Has he mentioned anyone bothering him, following him, any unusual phone calls or—" "No." Sarah shook her head. He doesn't tell me about that stuff. He tries to keep me separate from the business side of things." "The business side." Detective Morrison's tone was carefully neutral. "Mrs. Moretti, are you aware of the nature of your husband's business dealings?" Sarah felt her spine straighten despite her fear. "My husband is a real estate developer and property manager. He's done more for this community than— Your husband has connections to organized crime." The words hung in the air between them. Sarah stared at the detective. "That's not true." "Mrs. Moretti, no." Sarah stood up, even though her legs felt like water. "I don't know what you think you know about my husband, but Luca is a good man. He helps people. He also launders money for the Catalano family and has ties to several known criminals." Sarah felt sick. The baby kicked, as if sensing her distress. "I want to see my husband," she said quietly. "He's still in surgery." "Then I'll wait. But I'm done answering questions without a lawyer present." Detective Morrison sighed and stood up. "Call me if you think of anything." She handed Sarah a card. "And Mrs. Moretti, be careful. Whoever shot your husband might not be finished." Sarah sat in the surgical waiting room for 4 hours. Marco appeared at some point, Luca's loyal driver who'd become a friend over the years, and sat beside her without a word. Other men came and went, men Sarah recognized from Luca's buildings, his businesses. None of them spoke to her directly, but their presence was oddly comforting. Finally, a surgeon appeared, still in his scrubs. "Mrs. Moretti, your husband made it through surgery. The next 24 hours will be critical, but he's strong. We're cautiously optimistic." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "Can I see him?" "He's in recovery. Give us another hour, and then you can sit with him." That hour felt like days. When they finally let her into his room, Sarah had to stop in the doorway because the sight of him, pale and still, tubes and wires everywhere, machines beeping, nearly broke her. But she forced herself to walk to his bedside, to take his hand. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "You have to be okay. Our baby needs you." "I need you." Luca's eyes fluttered open. He looked at her, and even through the pain medication, she could see the fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself, fear for her. "Sarah," his voice was barely audible, "you need to leave the city." "What? No, I'm not leaving you." "Not safe." Each word seemed to cost him. "They were targeting me, but if they can't get to me, they'll go after you, after the baby." Sarah's blood ran cold. Who? Who did this? "Doesn't matter." Luca tried to sit up and failed, grimacing. "Marco will take you somewhere safe. Just until I can—" "No." Sarah's voice was firm. "I am not running. I am not leaving you here alone. We are in this together, Luca. That's what marriage means. Sarah, please, No. She leaned down, getting close to his face so he could see how serious she was. You spent 2 years teaching me that I don't have to be afraid anymore, that I'm strong enough to face anything. You don't get to send me away now because things got scary. We face this together, or not at all. Luca stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he smiled. You're going to be the death of me. Not if I have anything to say about it. Sarah kissed his forehead gently. Now tell me what's really going on, and don't you dare lie to me. So he told her about the Catalano family, who'd been trying to force him into a partnership he didn't want, about the businesses they wanted him to front for them, the money they wanted him to move, about his repeated refusals and their escalating threats. I thought I could handle it, Luca said quietly. I've dealt with people like them before, but this time they were serious. They sent someone to make a point. By shooting you. By trying to kill me. Luca's hand tightened on hers. They failed, but they won't stop, Sarah. These aren't people who give up. Then what do we do? We? Luca tried to laugh and ended up coughing. There is no we in this, Sarah. You're going somewhere safe, and I'm going to end this. How? I have friends, too. People who owe me favors. People who don't like the Catalano family any more than I do. His eyes were hard now, the softness of the injured man replaced by something colder, more dangerous. I should have dealt with this months ago. I was trying to be diplomatic. That's over. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This was the side of Luca she'd only glimpsed before, the side he kept carefully hidden from her. The side that had made Marcus run scared with just a few words. I don't want you to become someone you're not because of this, she said quietly. I'm not becoming anyone, Sarah. This is who I've always been. I just tried to protect you from it. Luca met her eyes. The detective told you about my connections, didn't she? She said you launder money, that you're involved with organized crime. And do you believe her? Sarah thought about it, really thought about it, about the man she'd married, who remembered the names of every tenant's children, who'd personally paid for Mrs. Chen's cancer treatment when her insurance denied her claim, who'd held Sarah through her nightmares and promised her she was safe. I believe you're a complicated man, she said finally. I believe you operate in a world I don't fully understand. And I believe that whatever you've done, you've had your reasons. She squeezed his hand. But I also believe you're a good man, Luca, a good husband, and you're going to be a good father. Nothing else matters. Luca's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do. Sarah kissed him again. And you're going to get better, and we're going to figure this out, and we're going to raise our baby together. That's how this ends. Over the next 3 days, while Luca recovered, Sarah learned more about her husband's world than she'd learned in 2 years of marriage. Marco explained it to her in careful, diplomatic terms, how Luca had inherited connections from his father, how he'd used those connections to build his empire, but had always drawn lines, how he helped people in the neighborhood, yes, but also helped people who existed outside the law, how he was respected because he was fair, but feared because he was ruthless when he needed to be. He's a good man in a complicated world, Marco said, and right now, that world is very dangerous for him, for you too. Then we make it less dangerous, Sarah said. How? I don't know yet, but I'm not running, Marco. So either help me figure this out, or get out of my way. Marco studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. You really are perfect for him. The plan came together over the next 48 hours, with Sarah coordinating between Luca's hospital bed and the network of people who owed him favors. She met with men whose names she'd only heard whispered, made calls to numbers she was told to delete immediately after, and discovered she had a talent for negotiation she'd never known she possessed. You're terrifying, Luca told her on the 4th day when she updated him on the latest development. You know that? I learned from the best, Sarah said with a smile. The final meeting happened in Luca's hospital room, with him propped up in bed and Sarah standing beside him. The Catalano family sent 3 representatives, older men in expensive suits who looked at Sarah like she was a curiosity. "We don't negotiate with wives," one of them said dismissively. "Then you negotiate with me," Luca said, his voice still weak but his eyes hard as diamonds. "But she stays. She's part of this now." The men exchanged glances, then the oldest one, a man with silver hair and cold eyes, nodded. "Say what you need to say. Here's what's going to happen," Luca said. "You're going to leave my family alone. You're going to leave my businesses alone. And in exchange, I'm going to forget this ever happened." "That's not much of a negotiation." "I'm not finished." Luca leaned forward slightly, ignoring Sarah's worried hand on his shoulder. "I've spent the last 4 days calling in every favor I'm owed. I have statements from 12 different witnesses placing your nephew at the scene of the shooting. I have documentation of your family's involvement in 6 different federal crimes. And I have copies of all of it ready to go to the FBI unless we reach an understanding right now." The room went very quiet. "You're bluffing," the silver-haired man said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Try me." Luca's smile was razor-sharp. "I've been building this city for 20 years. You think I don't know where all the bodies are buried? You think I don't have insurance? If you release that information, it will destroy your family. I know, that's the point." Luca's hand found Sarah's. "I was willing to coexist peacefully. You made that impossible when you put my wife and unborn child at risk. So now we do this my way, or we both go down in flames. Your choice." Sarah watched the calculation happen in the old man's eyes. The weighing of risks and benefits. The realization that Luca wasn't bluffing, that he'd really burn it all down if he had to. "What guarantees do we have that you won't use this information later?" the man asked finally. "My word," Luca said simply. "I keep my promises. Ask anyone." Another long silence. Then the silver-haired man nodded once, sharply. "We have an understanding. You keep your evidence to yourself. We leave you and yours alone. But this protection only extends to you and your immediate family. You step into our business again, the deal is void." "Fine with me," Luca said. "I never wanted any part of your business anyway." The men left. Sarah waited until the door closed before she let out the breath she'd been holding. "Is it really over?" she asked. "It's really over," Luca confirmed. He pulled her down to sit on the edge of the bed. "I'm sorry you had to see all that. Sorry you had to be part of it." "I'm not." Sarah took his face in her hands. "I'm your wife, Luca. Your partner. That means I stand with you, even when things get ugly. Especially when things get ugly. You could have been hurt. The baby could have been... But we weren't. We're fine. And now we're safe, because you handled it." Sarah smiled. "We handled it. Together." Luca kissed her then, deep and thorough despite the hospital bed and the lingering pain from his injuries. "I love you," he said when they broke apart. "God, Sarah, I love you so much." "I love you too." Sarah rested her head carefully against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Strong, steady, alive. "And I'm not afraid anymore. Not of Marcus, not of the Catalano family, not of anything. Because I know that whatever comes, we'll face it together." "Together," Luca agreed, his arms around her. 3 months later, their daughter was born. They named her Grace, because Luca said that's what Sarah had brought into his life. Grace and redemption, and a second chance at being the man he'd always wanted to be. The Catalano family kept their word. There were no more threats, no more violence. Luca's businesses continued to thrive. Sarah's accounting firm grew. They bought a house with a yard and a swing set, moved out of the apartment above the restaurant, built a life that looked almost normal from the outside. But Sarah never forgot those days in the hospital. Never forgot the feeling of not knowing if Luca would survive. Never forgot the cold calculation in those old men's eyes as they decided whether her family would live or die. She also never forgot her own strength. The way she'd refused to run. The way she'd stood beside Luca's hospital bed and helped him negotiate their safety. The way she'd discovered she was capable of so much more than she'd ever imagined. On their 3rd anniversary, Luca took her back to that rooftop restaurant where he'd proposed. The same private terrace, the same view of the city lights. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked as they stood looking out over the city. "Marrying me? Getting pulled into my world?" Sarah turned to look at him, her husband, her partner, the father of her child, the man who'd saved her, and then let her save him right back. "Not for a single second," she said. "You gave me my life back, Luca. The least I could do was fight for yours. We make a good team. The best team." Sarah leaned into his embrace, feeling his arms come around her, solid and sure. "Whatever comes next, we'll handle it. Together." "Together," Luca echoed. And they did. Every challenge, every threat, every moment of fear or doubt, they faced it side by side. The way they'd faced everything since that night when Marcus had pounded on her door and found Luca Moretti sitting on her couch. Sarah had gone from a woman too afraid to answer her own door to a woman who stared down mobsters and won. She'd found her strength, her voice, her purpose. But most importantly, she'd found her home. Not in a place, but in a person. In the man who'd seen her at her lowest and loved her anyway. Who'd protected her fiercely, but never made her feel weak. Who'd given her the space to discover who she really was, and then stood back and admired what she became. Years later, when Grace was old enough to ask questions, Sarah told her the truth. About Marcus, about the shooting, about the complicated world her father navigated with grace and strength. "Were you scared?" Grace asked. "Terrified," Sarah admitted. "But being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. Sometimes it means you're brave enough to admit you're scared and do what needs to be done anyway." "Like you did." "Like I did," Sarah confirmed. "And like you'll do when your time comes. Because you're my daughter and your father's daughter, and that means you're stronger than you know." Grace hugged her tight, and Sarah closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of her daughter's shampoo, feeling the solid warmth of her in her arms. This was what she'd fought for. This moment, this life, this family. And it had been worth every second of fear, every moment of doubt, every risk she'd taken. Because she'd found something she never thought she'd have. A love that was real, a partnership that was equal, a future that was bright with possibility. She'd found her happy ending. And she was never, ever letting it go.